The earliest spoons were not spoons at all. Long before there were cities or roads or writing, there were hands and hunger and the need to hold something warm or soft or nourishing. Somewhere, in the mists of time, someone picked up a shell. Perhaps it was a small clam shell, smooth and cool to the touch. They dipped it into a shallow pool of water, or maybe into the broth from a pot placed gently over a fire. They lifted it and sipped. That shell was not yet called a spoon, but it was a beginning. Early humans, living in quiet valleys and forested edges, began to notice that certain objects were better for holding things than others. A curved stone with a natural hollow, a piece of bone, worn over time by water and weather, a wooden scoop, carved slowly, patiently, over the course of many evenings. These weren't tools of war or symbols of power. They were just helpful. Helpful in the way that a soft breeze is helpful on a hot day, or the way that a dry leaf makes a good place to rest a berry. Simple things. The earliest spoons, if we can call them that, didn't look much like today's spoons. Some were flat, almost like paddles. Others were deep and rounded, almost like tiny bowls with handles. They varied in shape and material, depending on what was nearby. In places with soft trees, like willow or birch, spoons were carved from wood. Where stone was more common, you might find a ladle-shaped rock, smoothed over generations. In colder regions, bone and ivory were used. Archaeologists, carefully brushing away centuries of earth and time, have found spoons made from mammoth ivory. Not many, just a few. Delicately shaped, quietly made, held by hands that no longer exist, but still remembered in the object they left behind. These spoons were not mass-produced. There were no factories, no blueprints. Each one was made slowly, carefully, by someone who needed it. Maybe for stirring a mixture of herbs and roots in a clay pot over an open flame. Maybe for feeding a small child something warm on a cold evening. They weren't perfect. Some were lopsided, others cracked, but they worked well enough. And in a world that changed slowly, where life moved to the rhythm of seasons and stars, there was no hurry to improve them. The spoon did not evolve through revolution. It evolved through stillness, quiet observation, a hollow here, a handle there, tiny refinements, barely noticeable. No one claimed to invent it. There were no patents, no arguments over design, just small, gentle changes. Over time, as communities grew, so did the ways people shared food. They gathered around fires, passing bowls, ladling out soups and stews. The spoon became a part of those gatherings, unnoticed, but always present. Used, wiped clean, and used again. It didn't tell stories. It didn't make speeches, but it helped feed mouths. And in that, it became indispensable. Some spoons were plain, others slightly decorated. Not for fashion, just because the carver had a moment and a knife and an idea. A simple spiral, a dot, a line, maybe a face, maybe just a mark. These were not status symbols. They were not trophies. Just spoons. Handmade, handheld, passed from hand to mouth, to fire, to earth. And when they broke, they were thrown away, or used to start another. A piece of broken bone became the base for a new handle. A cracked wooden scoop became fuel for the next meal. This cycle of use and renewal was natural, unremarkable, and yet somehow peaceful. Across continents, in the cradles of civilization, spoons began to appear more often. In burial sites, in caves, in the ashes of ancient hearths. Always there, always the same, in essence. A small, curved companion. People used them for porridge, for teas made from wild leaves, for thick broths, for cooling stews. They stirred, they scooped, they served. Never too much, never too little, just enough. In a world where many things were difficult, where survival required constant attention, the spoon was something simple, something you could count on. Its shape was gentle, Its sound, barely noticeable. It did not clatter like a pot, or roar like a fire. It was quiet, like the person who sits beside you, saying nothing, but always present. And so, the prehistorical spoon made no headlines. It didn't change the world, but it held the things that helped people survive it. As time moved forward, ever so gently, so did the spoon. The world grew slowly more organized. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. People began to write things down, build temples, study stars. And through it all, in the quiet corners of everyday life, the spoon remained. In ancient Egypt, where the Nile flowed like a sleeping river, people carved spoons from wood and ivory. The shapes were simple, rounded bowls, short handles, sometimes curved slightly to one side. Some were decorated lightly with lines and dots, or the faint suggestion of a lotus flower. Others bore the shapes of animals, gazelles, birds, and fish, not because they needed to, but perhaps because someone had time. In the dim light of a mud brick house, someone carved the outline of a bird into the back of a spoon handle. Maybe they smiled as they did it. Maybe they didn't. We'll never know. These spoons were not made for kings, though some kings had them. They were made for eating. Mostly soft things, porridge, stews, ground grains softened with milk or water. The Egyptians ate quietly in shaded rooms or beside the river. And the spoon was there, helping food move from bowl to mouth, unnoticed, but essential. In Mesopotamia, spoons were made from clay and metal. Some had holes in them, perhaps for straining. Others were flat. There's little writing about them, because spoons, even then, weren't considered important enough to mention, yet they were always used. In Greece, spoons began to take slightly more defined shapes. Some had longer handles, better for reaching into jars or deep pots. The Greeks loved their olives, their fish stews, their honeyed treats. And often, a spoon helped deliver these gentle flavors. It was not the focus of the feast, just the quiet courier. In Rome, spoons took on new names. Two of them have survived the centuries: the cochlearia and the ligula. The cochlearia had a narrow bowl and a long, pointed handle. Romans used it to eat shellfish or eggs or small delicacies. The pointed end could pierce or extract. It was practical, efficient, but still rather dull. The ligula was broader, shaped more like modern spoons. It had a round bowl and a shorter, thicker handle. Better for soups, porridge, anything soft. Romans made these spoons from bronze or silver or bone. They didn't talk about them much, but they were in every home. Found in ruins, scattered in baths, tucked in with the dead. Always present, never praised. Spoons, for the Romans, were part of civilized life. To eat with a spoon was to be dignified, orderly, human. And so they endured. Used every day, forgotten every night. In ancient China, spoons took a slightly different form. Long-handled, deep-bowled, sometimes made of jade. Used not only for food, but for medicine and ceremony. Some spoons were buried with their owners, not as treasure, but as necessity. The idea being, one might still need a spoon in the afterlife. Even the Maya, far across the oceans, had spoons, carved from hardwood, carefully shaped. They used them for cacao and maize dishes and thick stews. Though records are scarce, the spoons survive. In fragments, in shadows, they whisper of daily meals, of hands that stirred gently, of people long gone. And so, through the ancient world, the spoon moved quietly, never mentioned in legends, never carved into stone tablets or sung in songs. It did not conquer. It did not divide. It simply was. And in being so simple, it endured. More than swords, more than crowns. The spoon remained useful. 1,000 years could pass, and someone somewhere would still be using one. The same shape, the same purpose, to bring nourishment from bowl to mouth. A simple motion done a million times. A gesture so ordinary it becomes invisible, but still comforting, still essential. In ancient markets, spoons were sold alongside baskets and bowls. In temples, they might rest beside offerings. In kitchens, they hung from walls. Always ready, always waiting, always ignored, but never gone. The ancient world moved slowly, and the spoon moved with it. Unchanged, unaffected, always just a spoon, and always just enough. As centuries passed, empires faded. The marble of Rome crumbled into ruins. The temples of Egypt stood quiet beneath sand and wind. And still the spoon endured. The Middle Ages came slowly, not with fanfare, but with fog. Villages grew quieter, castles rose, and roads turned muddy. And yet, in kitchens, in cottages, in chambers, spoons remained. In this time, they became more than just tools. They began to carry meaning. In medieval Europe, the material of your spoon often said something about who you were. A peasant might use a spoon, whittled from wood, its surface rough, its bowl slightly uneven, the handle worn smooth from years of use. Sometimes, one spoon was shared by an entire household, passed hand to hand, from stew pot to mouth to wash basin. Not hurried, just routine. The wealthy, by contrast, had spoons made from pewter, silver, even gold. Some engraved with coats of arms, others inlaid with tiny gemstones. But no matter how ornate, the spoon still performed the same humble task, lifting food, delivering it gently, then resting again. In monasteries, monks dined in silence. Benedictine rule, Cistercian rule, no talking, just soft sounds of bread torn by hand, of soup gently stirred by a spoon. Even the silence respected the spoon's quietness. And so it served, quietly, reliably, day after day. In noble households, spoons became symbols. They were part of dowries. They were given as wedding gifts. A silver spoon, placed in a box, wrapped in linen, passed down through generations. Some believed they offered protection. Others simply found them useful. In England, a tradition began. At a child's christening, a set of silver spoons might be given, each handle carved with a tiny figure. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. They were called apostle spoons. Some had all 12 apostles. A few added Christ. It said that King Henry VIII had a full set, though no one wrote much about them. Because, after all, they were spoons. Beautiful, perhaps, but never exciting. Spoons traveled with pilgrims in cloth bags tied to belts. They dipped into traveling stews, shared by firelight. Some were carved with initials. Others were plain. No one bragged about their spoon. They simply kept it, used it, and occasionally replaced it. In castles, during feasts, the spoon was often overlooked. Trumpets might announce roasted boar or meat pies filled with spice. But somewhere on the long table was a spoon, waiting, perhaps for custard, or porridge, or simply a serving of something soft. Sometimes, spoons were made with folding handles. Travel spoons, for those on the move. Knights, scribes, merchants. They all carried spoons, tucked into pouches, forgotten until needed. Always ready, never dramatic. In some parts of the world, people still used hands, still used bread. But the spoon was never replaced, just supplemented. By the 14th century, artisans began crafting spoons with more care. Some added floral etchings. Others made handles in twisted patterns. But even then, the changes were subtle. The basic shape remained the same. A small bowl, a slender handle, curved just enough to rest in the palm. The Middle Ages were not known for innovation in cutlery. No revolutions in spoon technology, just slow, steady refinement. Spoons passed from mother to daughter, from apprentice to cook, from lord to page. In the background of banquets, in the corners of kitchens, spoons simply continued. There were no great spoon makers, no legends forged in spooncraft, but still they mattered. When the Black Death swept across Europe, millions died, and still, spoons were buried with the dead, placed gently in graves, perhaps to bring comfort, perhaps just habit. Either way, they were present. As always, the spoon did not waver, not in famine, not in plague, not in war. When towers fell, when banners changed, when kings rose and fell, the spoon was untouched, still lifting broth to mouths, still scraping the bottom of bowls, still just a spoon. And for that, it was perfect. The world began to stretch. Maps grew more detailed and more mysterious. Blank spaces were filled with dragons, or clouds, or silence. Ships set sail from harbors cloaked in morning mist. Flags fluttered gently in the salt air. And below deck, in crates and chests, nestled among dry goods and wool, spoons were packed, quietly, without ceremony, just included. Wherever explorers went, spoons followed. They weren't part of grand tales. No journal ever wrote, "Today, I used my spoon." But they were always there, wrapped in cloth, tied with twine, or slipped into satchels. Wooden ones, mostly, or simple metal. No one thought much of them. But no journey could go long without them. For without a spoon, soup is difficult. Gruel, nearly impossible. In the Arctic, explorers warmed tins over oil lamps. In the jungles, they stirred rice near open fires. In the desert, they scooped dried lentils from battered bowls. Always with a spoon. It didn't matter the continent or the climate. The spoon adapted. Made of bamboo in one place, bone in another, tin, brass, horn, each shaped by hand or hammered by tools. Curved slightly, stirring gently, never rushed, never praised. In ship logs, they wrote of storms, of stars, of provisions running low, but never of spoons. And still, spoons continued. During long crossings, they were passed between crew members, sometimes shared, sometimes lost overboard, sometimes tied with string and tucked into a coat. They never mutinied, never cracked under pressure. They simply served. When sailors reached new shores and met new peoples, they saw new ways of eating. Chopsticks in the East, flatbreads used as spoons in the Middle East, hands skillfully scooping in parts of Africa and India. But even then, the spoon found its place. In porridge, in stews, in soft rice puddings cooled on a windowsill. It never tried to dominate, just assisted. In distant colonies, spoons were replicated. Local artisans carved them from native woods, some with rough edges, some perfectly smooth, each one unique. And yet, always familiar. There were spoons used by naturalists, botanists in jungles, drawing samples, scooping soil, stirring tinctures, all without fanfare. In the Americas, early settlers carried spoons from home. Family spoons, some engraved with initials, others blank. They sat at wooden tables in cabins built by hand, and dipped into cornmeal mush or broth from game caught that day. The spoon was always within reach, even when forks were still uncommon, even when knives were shaped from shards. The spoon was ready. Explorers may have mapped new lands, named rivers, climbed mountains, but in quiet moments at the edge of campfires under unfamiliar stars, they used spoons to eat, to stir, to feel normal. Some spoons were lost in the wild, others buried with their owners. A few lie in museums now, behind glass, labeled with small white placards, often overlooked, but still they remain, as they always have, unchanging, unbothered, useful, and quiet. The world began to hum, first softly, then louder. The hiss of steam, the clatter of iron, the long, slow whistle of progress. Factories rose like giants, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. The air thickened with soot and invention. But beneath it all, quietly, humbly, the spoon endured. The Industrial Revolution brought change to everything. To travel, to textiles, to time itself, and yes, even to spoons. No longer carved one by one. In workshops warmed by hearths, spoons were now stamped by machines, pressed into molds with metallic size, cut and cooled, shaped and shined. By the dozens, by the hundreds, by the thousands. Spoons on assembly lines, stacked in trays, sorted in boxes. Identical, reliable, quiet. Factories made spoons from nickel silver, from iron, from brass, eventually stainless steel. No tarnish, no fuss. They slid from the machines in gleaming rows, handled by gloved workers, wrapped in tissue paper, sent to stores, to homes, to hotels. People rarely noticed them, and yet they were everywhere. In railway dining cars, gliding through fog. In boarding schools, clinking against porridge bowls. In hospital wards, stirring medicine into tea. The spoons asked for no recognition. They simply did their job. In Britain, teaspoons became common. Small, delicate, designed not for stirring rebellion, but for sweetening moments. In France, dessert spoons. Refined, elegant, but never loud. Spoon production increased. Soon, nearly every drawer had one, usually more than one. 12, perhaps, neatly lined in velvet-lined cases. Gifted at weddings. Collected, but not admired. Polished, but not cherished. Just used. In America, spoon factories produced patterns. Victorian, Art Nouveau, minimalist. Some with swirling engravings. Some plain as a cloudless sky. And still, they serve the same purpose. Lift, stir, deliver, rest. There were souvenir spoons too. Small spoons with names of cities. Engraved landmarks. A tiny Eiffel Tower. A miniature Niagara Falls. Spoons as keepsakes. Not to be used. Just kept. Dust settled on them. And they didn't mind. In cafes, spoons sat beside coffee cups. Sometimes forgotten on saucers. In diners, they stirred milk into oatmeal. In factories, workers ate from tin bowls. Each with a spoon, worn from use, but functional. Even during world wars, spoons were present. Soldiers carried mess kits. Simple metal spoons. Dented, scratched, but dependable. When rations came in cans. When food was meager. When silence fell between battles. The spoon was there. Unseen, but held. The shape had changed little. Machines made them faster, smoother, cheaper. But the essence was the same. A curve for holding. A handle for guiding. That was enough. It always had been. In this age of smoke and steam, of whistles and wires, the spoon stayed simple. It didn't demand attention. It didn't need reinvention. It just kept being a spoon. And the world kept needing it. Today the world is fast, but the spoon is not. It hasn't changed much. It didn't need to. Modern spoons come in many forms. Teaspoons, tablespoons, soup spoons, dessert spoons, measuring spoons, slotted spoons, ladle-like spoons, even the grapefruit spoon, with tiny teeth for citrus. Some are stainless steel, some plastic, others bamboo, ceramic, or compostable materials. But still they are spoons. You likely have a drawer full of them. Some shiny, some scratched, some from sets, some mismatched. One might have a bent handle. Another, a tiny dent from the garbage disposal. But they still work. And that's all they ask. We use them without thinking. To stir sugar into coffee. To taste soup while it simmers. To scoop yogurt. Or cereal. Or peanut butter. They wait in lunchboxes. They sit quietly beside mugs. They accompany cakes. They sneak a bite of ice cream late at night. Still silent. Still steady. In restaurants, spoons are wrapped in napkins. In airplanes, they're tucked into meal trays. In cafes, they clink against glass. Some spoons are disposable. Used once, then gone. But even then, they serve. Even when unnoticed, they participate. In science labs, tiny spoons measure powders. In kitchens, they become part of muscle memory. 1 scoop of salt, half a spoon of cinnamon. Spoons appear in expressions. A silver spoon. A spoonful of sugar. Spooning with someone. Too many spoons in the drawer. Spoons are even part of certain philosophies. Spoon theory. Measuring energy not by hours, but by spoons. Used up slowly or all at once. Even in technology, the spoon finds its way. Emoji keyboards have a spoon now. Spoon. Minimal. Plain. But unmistakable. Artists sometimes paint spoons. Photographers line them up. Designers craft ergonomic ones. Collectors frame them. But most spoons just live in drawers. Used. Rinsed. Returned. And they don't complain. They're not trying to be special. They're just present. Even when machines become smarter. When homes become automated. When voices command lights to turn off. Spoons remain analog. Tangible. Timeless. They don't beep. They don't break easily. They don't need updates. The spoon just is. It's one of the few tools that never really needed fixing. Its shape, nearly perfect. Its function, clear. Its presence, reassuring. In a world of change, the spoon stays the same. A simple curve. A soft reflection. A quiet helper. Always there. And so, we've reached the end of our long, slow, uneventful journey. From shells in the dirt to silver on the table, the spoon has traveled far, yet it has changed very little. It never led a rebellion, never launched an empire, never shouted to be heard. It simply served, through centuries and civilizations, wars and peace, feasts and famines. The spoon was always there, not seeking glory, just helping. It didn't stir controversy, only tea. It didn't carry history's weight, only soup. Quiet, dependable, gentle. A shape so familiar, it fades into the background. And that is what makes it special. So now, as you lie still, your body relaxed, your thoughts drifting gently like fallen leaves, let yourself rest. There are no battles here, no twists, no noise, just the spoon. Simple, steady, soft. Let its calm presence, its ordinary comfort, wrap around you like a warm blanket. You are safe here, in this quiet place, where even the smallest stories can help you sleep. Thank you for spending this time with me, for joining the humble journey of the uneventful, undramatic, untroubled spoon. Sleep well and dream of something very, very boring.